Welcome to our deep dive into the world of Friedrich Nietzsche. You guys gave us some really fascinating material to work with, excerpt from a YouTube video essay, right? And it focuses on like his ideas about free will and morality and stuff.
Yeah, it's definitely a great place to start, when you're trying to wrap your head around Nietzsche.
It is. And the video argues that like even our simplest choices, the ones we think we're totally in control of, they're actually they're kind of influenced by all these forces we don't even realize.
Right, exactly. Like cultural programming and like childhood experiences, societal expectations, that sort of thing.
Yeah. So it's not saying we like don't have free will at all, but just that we should try to be aware of all the things that are influencing our decisions.
Yeah, and Nietzsche believed that like once we understand those forces, then we can actually start making more authentic choices.
Oh, I like that. That's a good point. It's kind of like once you see the strings, you can start to figure out which ones you can maybe cut or which ones you need to keep.
Exactly. And that's where this idea of the will to power comes in, which the video goes into.
The will to power. Okay, so I used to think that was like all about, being super powerful and dominating everyone.
Yeah. No, it's definitely more nuanced than that.
So the video explains that Nietzsche saw it as this like fundamental drive, right? And it's not just in humans, it's like in all living things to like trying to overcome limitations and like reach their full potential.
Exactly. It's about growth. Self-actualization, so like when you learn a new skill or you push yourself physically or even just connect with others, like all of that is part of the will to power.
Okay, so even when I'm just being a total couch potato and like binging Netflix, that's still my will to power, just like taking a break or something.
Well, maybe. But the real point is to look at how this drive is shaping your choices. Like, are you being true to yourself or are you being driven by stuff you're not even aware of?
Oh, that's deep. Okay, now another thing that really stuck with me was this idea of like master morality versus slave morality.
Yeah, that's a pretty intense one.
Right. Like, it sounds kind of scary, but the video explains it pretty well.
Well, Nietzsche, he was known for his thought-provoking ideas.
For sure. So the video explains it as like two different frameworks for morality, and they often clash within us.
Right.
So master morality is, it's all about like strength and achievement, being assertive, kind of like the traditional hero.
Yeah, and then slave morality is more about humility and compassion, empathy for others.
Yeah, exactly. So Nietzsche believed that these two moralities are like constantly battling it out inside each of us.
And you can really see it. Like, have you ever felt guilty for like succeeding at something or like hesitant to speak up when you have a good idea?
Oh, totally. All the time.
Well, that could be like a sign of those two moralities, like duking it out in your head.
Whoa, that's so interesting. No wonder I feel so conflicted sometimes. So like if we can become aware of those systems, maybe we can choose which one we want to follow, right?
Awareness is definitely like the first step to making more conscious choice. Okay, but let's talk about another big concept here. Resentment. Oh, yeah. The video described it as like this poison that can totally mess us up. Yeah, it's insidious,
It is. And the video said it can make us focus on what other people have instead of what we actually want.
Right, exactly. So instead of being proactive and going after our goals, we become reactive and fixated on what we lack.
Oh, so like when you're scrolling through social media and you see someone's like perfect vacation photos and you just feel that pang of, envy. That's resentment.
Yeah, that's a perfect example. It's all about like recognizing when you're falling into that trap, that comparison trap, and focusing on your own path instead.
Right. Okay. That makes sense. So we've got the will of power, these two moralities battling it out inside us, and then like the danger of resentment. That's a lot to process.
It is.
But where does the Übermensch fit into all this? I got to be honest. I always thought it was like some kind of supervillain or something.
Yeah, no, that's a common misconception. The Übermensch isn't about like lording it over everyone else, It's about mastering yourself, overcoming all those invisible forces that are like holding you back.
Oh, okay. So instead of being like controlled by what society expects of us or like values that we've just kind of inherited, the Übermensch, they make their own values, right? And they live their lives with intention.
Yeah, that's a really good way to put it. The Übermensch embraces challenges, acts authentically, and isn't driven by like resentment or the need for external validation, It's all about reaching your full potential.
Wow, that's pretty inspiring. But it sounds like a lot of work.
It is. It all starts with realizing that most of our values, they actually come from outside of us. Like we inherit them from our families, our culture, the environment we grow up in.
That's true, yeah. I never really thought about it like that.
Yeah, and so like The first step is realizing that, we've been handed this set of values.
And then what, like, we got to ask ourselves, do I actually believe this? Does this, like, fit with who I really am?
Exactly. That's like Nietzsche's challenge to all of us, He wants us to examine our beliefs and build a life that truly reflects who we are, not just what we've been told we should be.
Oh, that's powerful. It's like taking responsibility for the values that we choose to live by, not just accepting what we've always known.
Exactly. And, that brings us to one of Nietzsche's most profound and often misunderstood concepts, amor fati, or the love of fate.
The love of fate. Okay, now that sounds intense. Like, are we supposed to just love everything that happens to us, even like the bad stuff?
Well, it's not quite about just passive acceptance. It's more about embracing all of it, the highs and the lows, and recognizing that all of it kind of shapes who we are.
So it's more about acknowledging that life is going to have good stuff and bad stuff, and both are important. Like, they're both part of the journey.
Precisely. It's about seeing challenges as opportunities for growth, and even setbacks as like chances to learn valuable lessons.
Okay, that makes a bit more sense. But like, how do we actually, get that kind of mindset? It sounds really hard, especially when you're dealing with like real hardship and stuff.
Oh, it definitely takes practice, for sure. It starts with becoming more aware of like your thoughts and how you react to things, So like when you catch yourself spiraling into self-pity or resentment, you got to challenge those thoughts.
So instead of asking, why is this happening to me? We should be asking, what can I learn from this?
Exactly. It's a powerful shift,
Yeah.
And it's not about pretending that pain or suffering doesn't exist. It's about seeing it as part of the human experience, like one of the threads in this big tapestry of life.
Okay, I like that. That's a really nice way to put it. But Nietzsche wasn't all about just accepting fate, right? Didn't he also talk about how important it is to create our own values? Those two ideas seem kind of like they're pulling in opposite directions.
Yeah, that's a sharp observation.
Yeah.
They do seem to be in tension, but maybe it's more about finding like a balance.
Balance, okay.
Yeah, like we accept the things we can't change, but we also take responsibility for the choices that we can make,
So we embrace what is, but we also actively shape our own lives by choosing the values that guide us.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that we have agency, we have the power to create meaning in our lives, even when things feel random or unpredictable.
This is starting to click for me. So like Nietzsche was challenging us to become like, conscious architects of ours.
He absolutely was. He wanted us to question everything, examine what we believe, and actively choose the values that align with our true selves.
Yeah. It's about becoming aware of those invisible forces, right? The ones we talked about earlier, and then like making conscious choices about how we respond to them.
Yes. And that's where the will to power comes in again, It's not just about overcoming external obstacles, but mastering your inner world, your thoughts, emotions, your reactions to things.
Oh, okay. So we're using our will to power to not just achieve stuff in the outside world, but to like cultivate self-awareness and shape our inner landswell.
Exactly. It's about aligning your actions with your chosen values, becoming the author of your own story,
I'm realizing that this whole creating your own values thing, it's not just a one-time thing, right? Like we don't just decide one day and that's it.
You got it. It's a constant journey of self-discovery and growth, for sure. Our values, they can evolve as we have new experiences and gain new perspectives.
Yeah. That makes sense. Oh, and speaking of big changes and new perspectives, this reminds me of something the video touched on, the death of God.
Ah, yes, that one.
I mean, it sounds pretty radical.
It is, but it's not really about atheism in the, literal sense.
Okay, good, because I was a little worried there first.
Yeah, it's more of a metaphor, for the loss of like traditional sources of meaning and authority. Like Nietzsche was pointing to a shift in Western thought, this realization that there isn't like one absolute truth or a single path for everyone.
So it's like instead of relying on external sources for meaning, we're being challenged to find our own, like create our own compass.
Exactly. And it can be both exhilarating and terrifying, to realize that we have that freedom, but also the responsibility to define what we believe and what gives our lives meaning.
Yeah, no kidding. No wonder Nietzsche was such a controversial figure. He was really shaking things up.
He was. And, his ideas, they're still relevant today. Maybe even more so, with how complex and uncertain the world is becoming.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so we've covered amor fati, creating value, the death of God. I feel like I'm starting to get a much deeper understanding of what Nietzsche was all about.
That's great to hear. It's definitely a journey, and it's clear that you're really engaging with these ideas.
I am. I'm ready for the next challenge. Is there anything else we need to unpack from this video before we wrap things up?
Well, as we've been talking, one thing that keeps coming back to me is this idea of the will to power. It seems to connect to everything, how we make choices, how we create our values, even how we deal with those invisible forces that are shaping our lives.
Yeah, that's true. It's like this underlying current that runs through all of his ideas.
Exactly. The will to power, it's really at the heart of Nietzsche's philosophy. It's the driving force behind our actions, our creativity, our desire to grow and overcome limitations.
And it's not just about brute force or dominating others, right? It's more about self-mastery and striving for excellence, in our own unique way.
Right. Think of it as the energy that propels us forward. It's what motivates us to learn new skills, pursue our passions, and even build meaningful relationships.
So it's like this inner fire that fuels our growth and self-expression.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. But here's the thing. Nietzsche believed that our will to power can manifest in healthy ways or unhealthy ways, depending on where we direct it.
Okay, now that's interesting. What do you mean by healthy versus unhealthy expressions of the will to power?
Well, if our will to power is, fixated on external validation, comparing ourselves to others or seeking to dominate them, that can lead to resentment, envy, even destructive behaviors.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's like when people get so obsessed with power or status that they end up hurting others or compromising their own values in the process.
Exactly. But when our will to power is directed inward toward self-improvement, creativity, authentic self-expression, it can be a really powerful force for good.
So it's about harnessing that inner drive and channeling it towards something, constructive, something that's life-affirming.
Exactly. Think about artists and musicians, entrepreneurs, or even just everyday people who are passionate about their hobbies, or dedicated to making a difference in their community. They're all tapping into their will to power in a healthy way, expressing their unique potential and, contributing to the world around them.
This reminds me of the Übermensch concept again. It's not about being superior to others, but about striving to become the best version of yourself.
That's a great connection. The Übermensch really is a representation of someone who has embraced their will to power fully, who lives authentically, creates their own values, and is always seeking to overcome their own limitations.
It's inspiring, but it also feels like a really big challenge. How do we even begin to cultivate that kind of self-mastery and purpose?
It all starts with self-awareness. Remember those invisible forces we talked about earlier?
The ones that are always shaping our choices and stuff?
Yeah, exactly. The first step is to recognize how they're influencing our thoughts, emotions, even our behaviors.
So becoming more aware of things like cultural programming, societal expectations, and even those deep-seated beliefs that might be holding us back.
Exactly. And once we're aware of those influences, then we can start to question, challenge them, and ultimately choose the ones that align with our true selves.
And that's where the process of creating our own values comes in, right?
Yes. It's about taking responsibility for what we believe in and what we stand for, how we want to live our lives. It's not about blindly accepting what we've been told or conforming to, societal norms.
Right.
It's about consciously choosing the values that resonate with our deepest selves.
That sounds like it takes a lot of introspection and critical thinking.
It definitely does, but the rewards are huge. When we align our actions with our authentic values, we experience a sense of purpose, fulfillment,
I can see how that connects with the idea of amor fati too. When we embrace our fate, when we say yes to life with all its challenges and complex, we're also choosing to live in accordance with who we really are.
Beautifully said. It's all interconnected. Amor fati is about accepting the totality of our experience, the good and bad, and recognizing that it all contributes to our growth and evolution.
Wow, this has been an incredible deep dive into Nietzsche's ideas. I feel like I'm seeing the world through a whole new lens now.
I'm so glad to hear that. Nietzsche's philosophy can be challenging, but it's also incredibly liberating.
It is. It empowers us to question, to explore, to create our own path.
Exactly. It's a call to action, to become more conscious, more deliberate, more intentional in how we live our lives.
So, listener, as we wrap up this Nietzschean deep dive, we'll leave you with this thought. What invisible forces are shaping your life? What values are truly yours? And how can you embrace your will to power to create a life that is both meaningful and fulfilling? Keep questioning, keep exploring, and keep pushing those boundaries.
And remember, as Nietzsche famously said, become who you are.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time, keep diving deep. All right, so we're back and ready to tackle this love of fate concept. Amor fati. I gotta say, it sounds kind of intense. Are we just supposed to smile and accept everything that happens, even the really tough stuff?
Well, it's not exactly about, just passively accepting everything. It's more about like embracing the whole experience, the good and the bad, and recognizing that all of it shapes who we are.
Okay. So it's more about acknowledging that life is going to have, ups and downs, and both are like essential parts of the journey.
Exactly. It's about seeing challenges as like opportunities for growth,
right? Yeah.
And setbacks as like chances to learn valuable lessons. Instead of dwelling in like negativity or regret, we try to look for the meaning in every experience.
Okay. I think I'm starting to get it a little better, but how do we actually like put that into practice, cultivate that kind of mindset? It sounds incredibly difficult.
It definitely takes practice, that's for sure. But it starts with, becoming more mindful of your thoughts and how you react to things.
Okay.
Like when you catch yourself spiraling into, self-pity or resentment, you got to challenge those thoughts.
So instead of asking, why is this happening? We try to reframe it and ask, like, what can I learn from this?
Yeah. Exactly. It's a powerful shift in perspective. And again, it's not about denying the reality of, pain or suffering, but it's about choosing to see it as, as part of the human experience.
That's a nice way to put it. But Nietzsche wasn't all about like just accepting fate, right? He also talked a lot about the importance of creating our own values. Right?
Yeah.
And those two ideas, they seem kind of, contradictory.
Yeah, it's a good point. They do seem to be in tension, but maybe it's more about finding a balance.
Or balance, okay.
Yeah, like, we acknowledge and accept the things we can't change, but we also, take responsibility for the choices that we can make.
So we embrace the reality of our circumstances, but we also actively shape our own lives by choosing the values that guide us, right?
It's about recognizing that we have, agency, that we have the power to create meaning in our lives, even when things feel, totally unpredictable.
This is all making a lot more sense now. So like Nietzsche was really challenging us to become, the conscious creators of our own lives.
He was. He really urged us to question everything, to examine what we believe, and to actively choose the values that align with, our authentic selves.
It's about becoming aware of those invisible forces, right? The ones that we talked about earlier, and then making conscious choices about how we respond to them.
Yeah, exactly. And that's where the will to power comes in again.
Yeah.
It's not just about overcoming like external obstacles, but about mastering your inner world, your thoughts, emotions, reactions.
Oh, okay, I see. So we can use our will to power to, not just achieve things out in the world, but also to cultivate self-awareness and like shape our inner landscape as well.
Precisely. It's about, aligning your actions with your chosen values, becoming the author of your own story.
And I'm realizing that, this whole thing about creating your own values, it's not like a one-time thing, is it? Like you don't just decide one day and then that's it, you're done.
You got it. It's an ongoing process for sure. It's a journey, of self-discovery and growth. Our values, they can change and evolve as we, gain new experiences, new perspectives.
That makes sense. Oh, and speaking of like big shifts in perspective, this reminds me of something that the video touched on, the death of God.
Ah, yes. Yes, that's a big one.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds pretty radical.
It is a powerful image, but it's not really about like atheism in the literal sense,
Okay.
Because I was a little worried there for a second.
Yeah, it's more of a metaphor, for the loss of like traditional sources of meaning and authority.
Okay, so like the old ways of thinking are kind of crumbling and we're having to figure things out on our own. Yeah, exactly. Like Nietzsche was pointing to this shift in Western thought, this realization that there isn't like one absolute truth or one single path for everyone.
So instead of relying on like external sources for meaning, we're being challenged to, to find our own, like create our own company.
Exactly. And it could be, could be both exciting and kind of scary at the same time.
Yeah.
To realize that we have that freedom, but also the responsibility to define what we believe in and what gives our lives.
Yeah, no kidding. No wonder Nietzsche was such a controversial figure. He was really shaking things up.
He definitely was. And, his ideas, they're still so relevant today. Maybe even more so with how, complex and uncertain the world is becoming.
Yeah, true. Okay, so we've explored, amor fati, creating values, the death of God. I feel like I'm getting a much deeper understanding of, Nietzsche's philosophy now.
That's great to hear. It really is a journey of exploration.
Yeah.
And it's clear you're really engaging with these ideas.
I am ready for the next challenge. Is there anything else from the video that we need to unpack before we wrap things up.
As we've been talking about all this stuff, one thing that keeps coming back to me is this idea of the will to power, right? It seems to be connected to everything, like how we make choices, how we create our values, even how we deal with those invisible forces.
Yeah, that's true. It's like this, I don't know, this underlying current that runs through all of Nietzsche's ideas.
Exactly. It's really at the heart of his whole philosophy. It's the force that drives us, our actions, creativity, our desire to like grow and push beyond our limits.
And it's not just about like brute strength, right? Or like dominating other people. It's more about self-mastery and like striving to be the best you can be in your own way.
Right, exactly. Think of it as the energy that pushes us forward. It's what motivates us to like learn new things, go after what we're passionate about, even build those meaningful relationships.
So it's like this inner fire that fuels our growth and how we express ourselves.
Yeah. That's a great way to put it. But here's the thing. Nietzsche believed that our will to power can manifest itself in like healthy ways or unhealthy ways. It all depends on where we point it.
Oh, okay. I see. So what do you mean by like healthy versus unhealthy expressions of the will to power?
Well, if our will to power is, all about getting validation from other people or comparing ourselves to others or trying to like have power over them, that can lead to some pretty negative stuff like resentment, envy, even destructive behaviors.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's like when people get so obsessed with power and status that they end up hurting other people or like compromising their own values.
Exactly. But when our will to power is focused inward on things like self-improvement, creativity, expressing ourselves authentically, it can be a really powerful force for good,
So it's about like taking that inner drive and channeling it into something positive and life-affirming.
Exactly. Think about like artists and musicians, entrepreneurs, or even just, everyday people who are passionate about their hobbies or want to make a difference in their community. They're all tapping into their will to power in a healthy way, expressing their potential and, making the world a better place.
This is making me think about the Übermensch again. Like, it's not about being better than everyone else, but about striving to become the best version of yourself, right?
That's a great connection. The Übermensch really embodies that idea of someone who has embraced their will to power, someone who lives authentically, creates their own values, and is always pushing themselves to grow.
It's inspiring, but it also sounds kind of, I don't know, daunting. Like, how do we even begin to cultivate that kind of self-mass purpose?
It all starts with the self-awareness, Remember those invisible forces we talked about before? The first step is being able to see how they're influencing us, our thoughts, emotions, our actions.
So like becoming more aware of the cultural programming and societal expectations and even those like really deep-seated beliefs that we have that might be holding us back.
Exactly. And once we're aware of them, we can start to question them, challenge them, and choose the ones that really align with who we are.
Which brings us back to creating our own values, right?
Yes. It's about taking ownership of what we believe in, what we stand for, how we want to live our lives. It's not about just accepting what we've been told or like conforming to what everyone else is doing.
Right.
It's about consciously choosing the values that resonate with us, the ones that feel true.
It sounds like a lot of like introspection and thinking critically about your own life.
It is, but it's so worth it. When we start living in alignment with our true values, we start to feel a sense of purpose, fulfillment, inner peace.
And I can see how that ties in with Amor Fati too. Like when we embrace our fate, when we say yes to life with all its like ups and downs, it's almost like we're also choosing to live in a way that's true to ourselves.
Beautifully put. It really is all connected, isn't it? Amor Fati is about accepting everything, the good and the bad, and knowing that it all plays a role in who we become.
Wow, this has been an incredible deep dive into Nietzsche for sure. I feel like I'm seeing the world in a whole new way now.
I'm so glad to hear that. His philosophy can be tough to wrap your head around sometimes, but it's also really empowering.
It is. It encourages us to question, to explore, to create our own path.
Exactly. It's a call to like wake up, to become more conscious, more deliberate, more intentional in how we live.
So to everyone listening out there, as we wrap up this Nietzschean deep dive, we'll leave you with this. What are those invisible forces that are shaping your life? What values are truly yours? And how can you embrace your will to power to create a life that is both meaningful and fulfilling? Keep questioning, keep exploring, and keep pushing those boundaries.
And remember, as Nietzsche famously said, become who you are.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time, keep diving.